When you're factoring, what are you finding? X. More specifically, you're getting two binomials, but what do those binomials tell you? M-Dog, what points? Close. X. The X what? The x-intercept. Factoring gives you the x-intercept. That's why we've been doing everything we've been doing. It gives you the zeros. It gives you where the graph crosses the x-axis. There's actually a really easy way to do that. It's called the quadratic formula. And all you do is you take the numbers, you plug them into a formula, and you're going to actually get your zeros or your x-intercepts. So that's what we're doing today. You're not going to get the quadratic formula on a formula sheet. So if I were you, I would star this, because that right there is what is called your quadratic formula. You need to memorize that. You're not going to get a formula sheet. Because there's not really any formulas you need to memorize, other than this one. So if you can remember the quad formula, you'll be good. My suggestion to you guys, moving forward from now on, every test that you write, the very first thing you write on your test, quadratic formula. Write it on the top of your test from now on, so you always know it during the test. You won't ever be like, oh yeah, what is it? That formula right there. Start it, memorize it.
You know which bucket
It's x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. We have three variables, a, b, and c. Anybody know where those variables might be coming from? From your quadratic formula. From the regular form that you write your quadratics in, a, b, and c. That's where these are from.
Wait, so if you get that formula, you just plug those numbers in.
Exactly. So there's two slides here, back to back. If you want some light reading to put you to bed, read those slides. I don't really care if you know how those came to be, but that's just a proof of why the quadratic formula works. Yeah. It's if you're curious. If you're like, why does this actually work? That explains why it works. Okay. We're going to practice it. So you get an equation. This one right here. It says solve that. So to solve it means to factor it, to find the zeros. That's what it means to solve something. So the very first step is to write your equation in general form. General form means x squared and then x and then nothing, and it's all equal to 0. This one's already in general form, so we're good to go. What's the a value? Ty. A is 1. So for this one, A is 1 because it came from right there. I'm going to write it out in red. The A is right there. What's the B value for this one? 2, which is right there. And what's the C value? The C value? -3, which is right there. So if you're asked to solve this thing and it doesn't say how to solve it, it just says solve it, you can use the quadratic formula. If it says to solve it by factoring, you have to factor it. It says to solve by completing the square, you have to complete the square. If it just says solve, you can just use the quadratic formula. So let's use the quadratic formula. All you do is you plug in all of the values that you just found, but use brackets. So x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. And that's all divided by 2 times a. Notice that I use brackets every single time I did a substitution. Every time I did a substitution, I used brackets. That's not a coincidence. I'm just going to extend this page. If you forget to use brackets, you run the risk of screwing up your negative values. My suggestion, use brackets. My second suggestion is solve everything underneath the root sign before you go on. So x is going to be equal to negative 2. That's going to be my first step. Negative 1 times 2. Plus or minus the square root. 2 squared is 4. Minus 4 times 1 times negative 3 would be negative 12. So minus negative 12. That's going to change it to a positive, yeah. Sorry, it's kind of faded there with the sign here. So minus negative 12. That's going to change that to a positive. That's why using brackets is so important. Then divided by, what's 2 times 1? 2. Underneath the root sign. 4 minus negative 12. 16. Minusing a negative is like adding. 4 plus 12 is 16. So we have negative 2 plus or minus the root of 16 divided by 2. My suggestion is always to work it down to this point. That's probably where you're going to get 1 mark. Plugging in the values and then simplifying to this spot, where you have something plus or minus the root of something, all divided by something. The next mark will come from doing the plus or the minus. Which one should we do? Because it says plus or minus root 16. So should we be doing the plus, or should we be doing the minus, or should we do neither, or should we do both? Somebody said it. Okay. Both. But do them separately. So you're going to have on the left side, x equals negative 2 plus 4 divided by 2. Remember the square root of 16 is just 4. And the other answer is going to be x is equal to negative 2 minus 4 divided by 2. Is everybody okay with why I have 2 answers now? Because it was plus or minus, or Rich? Like here?
No, change it to negative 1. Like divide everything on the top.
Yeah, we're not done yet. Yeah, we're going to combine the things on top and then divide by 2. Like, we're not quite done yet. We're just working our way through it. But is everybody okay with why I have 2 answers? Because that seems weird to most people, and they usually forget to do both answers. They just do one answer. Okay, the one on the left. Negative 2 plus 4 is 2. 4 minus 2 is 2. Divided by 2 is 1. So the first one is x equals 1. The second one, negative 2 minus 4, is negative 6, divided by 2. So the second one is x equals negative 3. That's your two answers. That's your two zeros. Does everybody know what we just solved? What does x equals 1 and negative 3 mean? Hands up if you know what that means. Hand up. Bingo. That's exactly what it is. You've got some sort of 2p function that's going to hit those two spots right on the x-intercept, at 1 and negative 3. When y is 0. Yeah. Okay. Go back to full screen. Here's a couple questions. I'm going to do the first one. You guys are going to do the second one. It just says solve the quadratics. So you don't need to do it any way in particular. You can choose the method you use. I'm going to say that we use the quadratic formula. So try it doing the quadratic formula. I'm going to do the first one. So x is equal to negative b, which is negative 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 4 squared, minus 4 times a times c, and it's all divided by 2a. If you simplify this, it becomes x equals negative 4 plus or minus the root of 20, all divided by 2.
So would it be like negative 4 times 1 times negative 1? Or just be 4 times 1?
It would be 4 times 1 times negative 1. And then you would subtract whatever your result is. So 4 times 1 times negative 1 is negative 4. And then you're doing minus negative 4. The square root of 20 doesn't come out to a nice number. So what we need to do is simplify that radical. So right now we have the square root of 20. If you simplify it, it becomes the square root of 4 times the square root of 5, which is just 2 times root 5. So we'll change that to be 2 root 5. Again, I need to. So it becomes x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus 2 root 5 divided by 2. Does anybody see something right now that they want to do to that equation? Megan. Divide everything by 2. You can take a factor of 2 out of the top, and it'll cancel with the one on the bottom. So we can divide everything by 2. So it comes up to be x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus root 5. That 2 cancels with the 4. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. And the 2 in front of the root 5 cancels out with the other 2. Got it.
Plus or minus 2 root 5, one equation, so 1 in front of that, so I can take out the 2 and apply it to the...
That's what you're saying. So if you, that makes sense to me. So if you're breaking that up into 2 equations, either way you would be dividing a 2 out at some point. So if you broke that down into negative 4 minus 2 root 5 divided by 2, you would still divide out a 2 after that. So it would work out the same way, whether you do it now or you do it later. Awesome. Yeah. That's not your final answer. You need to get two answers. So might as well write them separately. X is equal to negative 2 plus root 5, and x is equal to negative 2 minus root 5. It's equal to two different things, and that would be your final answer. X is equal to negative 2 plus root 5, and x is equal to negative 2 minus root 5. Those are my two answers. Any questions? Because I'm about to ask you to do the next one on your own. So, that's a great question. When I took the 2 out, I factored a 2 out of the top. I'm going to do it in red right now. I factor a 2 out, changes this to a 1, changes this to a 2. But now the 2 on the outside of the brackets cancels with the bottom. That's why it goes away. That's a great question. Any other question? Emily? For this next one? Like the very first number, like negative 1? Like from the formula? So it would be negative times negative 1. So it would cancel it out. Yeah, that's a great question. That's for question 2. She's already moved on. Go ahead and try to do the next one on your own. Okay, so if we're doing this question, you guys want to sub in your values, but you want to use brackets when you're doing it. So I've got x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4. And it's all divided by 2. Because 2a is just 2. Most of you guys did a good job with that. Your minus 1 is just x equals 1 plus or minus. On the inside, I get 4 times 4 is 16. 1 minus 16 is negative 15. All divided by 2. So some of you guys got negative 17. Just check your first value. That's the only thing that went wrong. 1 squared is just 1. It's a positive 1. So 1 minus 15 or 16 is negative 15. Some of you guys had a negative 1 there, and then we're adding those to be negative 17. Okay, at this point, there should be something kind of alarming to you, but I've done my job half decently this year. You are square rooting a negative. The square root of negative 15 is 4. That's not allowed, right? You can't square root negatives. It's not possible in this class. So what would your answer be? There's 3 words that you need to know. It's not does not exist. No real roots. So your answer to this would be no real roots. If something has no real roots, what does that mean about the graph? It's what? Put your hand up if you got an idea. It exists, and it's not a straight line. It's what? What are roots? No, M-Dog told us earlier. What are roots? When we do get answers, what is it telling us?
Oh, give us the x
It's telling you your x-intercept. So if there's no real roots, what's it tell you about your graph? There's no x-intercept. Oh, that's all that means. Okay. Does everybody get that? No real roots means there's no x-intercepts. Okay. Solve the following by completing the squares. This one tells you what you have to do. So for those of you who missed last week and didn't bother reading the notes that I put online, we're going to do a couple questions for you. So you got lucky. If you're completing the square, step 1 is move everything away from the x's. So I need to move this 2 to the other side, plus 2 to both sides. And I get x squared plus 4x equals 2. Our goal is to create something that we can factor. That's what completing the square is doing. Which means we're missing a c value. There's nothing there. Some people like to write it like this. You don't have to write it like this if you want to. Okay, I'll show you the way that Chase goes.
Why is there another rectangle on the other side?
I put a box where the missing c value is going to go, and I put a box on the other side because when we add our missing c value, you have to do it to both sides. You have to even out that weight scale. Zucker. Yes. CJ. Calvin. I don't care. You have to add something to both sides of the equation, and it has to be your missing c value. Who remembers the formula for your missing c value? C. Yes. Your missing c value is equal to b over 2 squared. Our b value is 4. So 4 over 2 squared. Which is just 4. That's our missing c value. So you can fill in your boxes now. Plus 4 plus 4. And the reason this is valuable is because now you can solve the one on the left. Who remembers what the factor is always going to be, Ty? Yeah, so you can dynamite it if you want. Yeah, you split your b value in half, and that's your factor. So it's x plus b over 2 squared is equal to 6. 2 plus 4 is 6. What is b divided by 2? That confused you? Okay. If that confused you, I'm gonna erase that. If you like that way, if you remember that it's always going to be b over 2, so be it. For the rest of us in the world,
Just like a different way, or is this how it's
when it tells you to complete the square, you better do it this way.
rectangles and everything?
You don't have to put the rectangles.
You get up there.
Just wait. Liam's got questions. Liam, if you weren't going to do rectangles, you just add a step where you add those two things in. Because you had x squared plus 4x is equal to 2. What's your missing c value? Okay. That's a good thing because a whole bunch of you guys did, so I don't think you're alone. The reason we complete the square, we do something called completing the squares, because this that we had, we could factor, supposedly. So we follow the rules of completing the square. Rule 1 is get everything to the other side. So that's what we did. Rule 2 of completing the square is create a c value and put it in. Because right now we have an a, a b, and there's no c in here. That's why we drew rectangles. It just represented our missing c value. That's all the rectangles did. Your c value is always this formula. It's your b value divided by 2, 4 divided by 2, and then squared. So for this question, your missing c value is 4. So you want to add in your missing c value. So it's x squared plus 4x plus 4. Now we have our c value back. But you can't just add things to one side of the equation or else they're not equal anymore. Right? If this was a weigh scale, we have two things that are equal, we add 4 to make that. So you have to add 4 to the other side to balance it back out. So plus equals 2 plus 4. The reason you did this is you've created something on the left-hand side that is factorable. Yeah. You can factor this. What are two numbers that add to be 4 and multiply to be 4? 2 and 2. Which means you have x plus 2 squared as your two factors. And it's all equal to 6. But remember, with completing the square, you're not done at this stage. Okay, I took this section right here, and I diamond tested it in. Things that multiply to be 4 and add to be 4. 2 and 2. X plus 2. X plus 2. Combined into x plus 2 squared. Okay. What's your last step? Yeah, you have to actually solve for x by itself. Square root both sides. Square root. Cancels. And you have x plus 2 is equal to the square root of 6.
Plus or negative?
Plus or minus the square root of 6. Every time you square root for the rest of your life, you will put plus or minus in front. Right? That's because we were starting with radicals. Like, we weren't taking x squared and then square rooting things. We were just starting with radicals. Subtract 2 from both sides. X is equal to negative 2 plus or minus square root 6. That would be your final answer. But there's actually two answers there, right? There's negative 2 plus root 6. And there's negative 2 minus root 6. If you did the quadratic formula, that's exactly what you did. See how similar that looks? Negative b, and then square root 4 or b minus 4ac. But then they divided out 2 out of everything. Docker.
You have to put the, like when you're putting the answer for this one, you have to put the negative 2 minus root 6 and the negative 2 plus root 6.
Yeah, you'll probably see it written as that. Like, you'll either see it like this, which really, it's not wrong, that's right, or you might see them broken up into two things. You might see, like, x equals negative 2 plus root 6, and x equals negative 2 minus root 6. You might see it broken up like that, but the only difference is if you can't do that square root. If you can't do the square root, they'll leave it like that. If you can do the square root, they'll break it down into two answers.
And short answer, like, for your answer would be right as.
Either one's acceptable. I would leave it as one I have boxed, right? Because you can't square root that. So that would be the way I prefer it. Either way is 100%. You get full marks. Ty.
When it says square, you define that.
That missing C.
Is that's a mark?
Yeah. So if we were to do this, if it was completing the square, you would get a mark for simplifying and bringing in the 4. So that would be 1 mark. maybe even 2. And then you get a 3rd mark for doing this part, for writing it into 2 factors. And then you get a 4th mark for getting the solution. So if you had cheated you and used the quadratic formula, you'd get 2 out of 4 on this. You'd get 1 out of 4 on this if you use quadratic formula. If it tells you to complete the square, you must complete the square.
If it tells you to do the quadratic thing, it'll say something about quadratic.
Exactly. And if it just says solve, do whatever way you want. Okay, we're going to do another one together. B. We're going to solve by using the completing the square. What's your first step? Your first step is get everything away from the x's that can be moved. That minus 4 can happen to both sides. Question?
Since negative 5 comes up to like 6.25 or something, can you just multiply it by 2? Like when you go to do the 5, like the b, it comes up to 6.5. So
No. Because you want to just leave it as, 5 over 2 squared. Just leave it as that. Don't change it to decimals. Okay, you subtracted 4 from both sides?
Yeah.
So you have x squared minus 5x equals negative 4. London.
it's like negative 4. You have to square root it.
Possibly, we have to add a c value to both sides. What's our c value going to be? Negative 5 over 2 squared. Your c value is negative 5 over 2 squared. You're going to add that to both sides. Maddie, how did you get that? How did you get negative 5 over 2 squared? It's a formula. Your missing c value is just a formula of b divided by 2 squared. So your c is equal to negative 5 over 2 squared. If you want, you can simplify this one to be 2.5 squared. But don't go any further than the 1 decimal. So if you squared that, you would get 6.25. Yeah, don't do that. We'll leave it at just 1 decimal. We don't want to do 6.25. That's kind of annoying. Yeah, you would leave it as 2.5 squared. Because some numbers won't work out nicely. Like 13 divided by 2 squared is not going to work.
So that would just work back into this 2.5
You got it. So add that to both sides. That's a good question also. It doesn't matter. Because when you square a negative, the negative goes away. So you can leave it as negative 2.5. For this one? Right, because it's either way it's going to be, when you square it, it's going to be positive, no matter what. So I already write it as positive because I know that's how it's going to end up. So I have x squared minus 5x plus 2.5 squared equals 4, sorry, not equal 4, equals negative 4 plus 2.5 squared, just like that. And so if you did that, it would be positive. Because negative 2.5 squared is the same thing as 2.5 squared. Because when you square negatives, they become positive. So it just makes our lives a little bit easier to get rid of that negative. Just looks a little nicer.
I did it a different way. It still comes up as the same type. So everything like 2 and then put brackets 1 over 2 on the outside, and then at the end it's...
I'll come look at you guys.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm worried about is that your A value is not 1. Your A value has to be 1 for another way. That's a good question. So let's try it. We're going to diamond method it. What goes on the top? 2.5 squared. What's on the bottom? Negative 5. Yeah, exactly. It'd be negative 2.5 and negative 2.5. That's why we completed the square. So it'll always work out to be half of whatever your b is. Negative 2.5, negative 2.5. It'll always work out that way. So you can, yeah, you can just skip ahead and put that in. You shouldn't, but I do it, so why not? So it becomes x minus 2.5 squared is equal to negative 4 plus 2.5 squared. But you're not done. You have to solve for x. How do you get x by itself? Square root both sides. That's going to cancel on the left. And you have x minus 2.5 is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 4 plus 2.5 squared. And you know what? Is that 2.5? Because you might see it in decimal form. If it's nice, 6.25 is not bad. You could write it as that if you want. That's not bad. That's not too terrible. Negative 4, right? But you're not rooting just negative 4. If you added negative 4 to 2.5 squared, it's positive. So you're okay. Add 2.5 to both sides. And you get x is equal to 2.5 plus or minus square root negative 4 plus 2.5 squared. I kind of phased off there. That's negative 4 plus 2.5 squared under the root sign. Time.
I keep that on. Would my answer change if I touch it? Like, no, not change. Would be wrong.
If you left it as 5 over 2 squared,
Yeah.
you'd be fine. Yeah. The only thing is, if it's multiple choice, just know that they might change it to a decimal, or they might leave it as a fraction.
Do like twice the word.
Well, if you leave it as a fraction,
Yeah, and then you don't. Okay, never mind.
it all works out the exact same. Instead of a 2.5, they just have a 5 over 2. Yeah, exactly. It's the exact same thing either way. And like, you can literally see the answers the exact same. How?
You not solve it further because the 2.5 squared is equal to.
That's a good question also.
It would also be
Think of it like this. The negative 4 plus the 2.5 squared are in brackets. They're stuck together. And when you square root them, that's like doing that, correct? An exponent law, you're not allowed to just distribute that into each thing. That's a binomial. So those can't just distribute. You can't just square root both of those separately. They're stuck as one thing. So no, you can't simplify them. As nice as that would be. London? Yeah, so if you wanted to do it, if you changed it to, this would be my final answer. People are just asking some what ifs. So if you changed it to a decimal, if you changed 2.5 squared into a decimal, you would get x is equal to 2.5 plus or minus the square root of 2.25. Right, and you can't square root 2.25, right? That comes out to an ugly number. So you would leave it like that. Potentially. Again, the same thing is all they've changed is they just changed that to a decimal and solved. Like all of these answers are the exact same. It's just different ways of writing it. Logan.
Like the second way, because on the first question we added the 2 to the 4 to get 6. So it's 2.5.
Yeah, so we added the 2 and the 4 to get square root of 6. That's the same idea, is that they've added the negative 4 to the 2.25 squared to get 2.25. Yeah. Okay. Solving quadratics not in that form. To be able to use the quadratic formula, you guys have to get it into general form. If you look at A and they ask you to factor that, it's definitely factorable. You're just going to have to manipulate it so that it looks like ax squared plus bx plus c. So you guys are going to have to get really good at just your kind of general sense of math and knowing that that can change to look like that. Who has an idea of how we could get it there?
Wouldn't you just square the x?
Let's get rid of each other. Just the
Wait, no,
positive
not
negative.
Tyler, what's your idea? We got a bunch of ideas going on, so we got a hand up.
Okay, so do you, well, I like Matt's idea, but you do that one thing where you
Are you looking for the word foil?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, you're doing it with your hands. You're like foiling with your finger there. Yeah. If you foil that, it'll give you an x squared term. Because x times x will give you x squared. So we're going to actually foil that binomial. So we get 2x is equal to 3. X times x is x squared. Plus x minus x minus 1. That's a difference of squares. If you see that, that's awesome. X minus 1 times x plus 1. That's a difference of squares when you FOIL it out. What do we do with this 3? Multiply it in. So that 3 distributes into both things. So it's now 2x is equal to 3x squared minus 1. Oh, minus 3. And now just subtract 2x from both sides, because it all has to be equal to 0, right? So 0 is equal to 3x squared minus 2x minus 3. Now we're in what we call general form. There's one part of general form that we haven't talked about this year that we did talk about last year. You want to try your best to have your A value as a positive number. It really doesn't matter, but that's just how it's written in general form most of the time. That's the proper way of doing it. At this point, use the quadratic equation, because that's the easiest way to solve these things. X is equal to negative b, negative 2 is just 2, plus or minus b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Simplify that. X is equal to 2 plus or minus the root of 4 minus negative 36. So 4 plus 36. 4 times 3 times negative 3. So it's the root of 4 minus negative 36. All divided by 6. Top. Yeah, 4 minus negative 36, that's 40. Yeah, you can just combine those. I'm going to go through that step one more time because I think I lost a couple people. Negative 2 squared is positive 4. We underline things that match up with each other. 4 times 3 times negative 3 is negative 36. 6 and 2 times 3. So, not quite, yeah, we're going to have to simplify our radical. Is everybody okay if I erase the left side? Okay. Erase the left-hand side. So we have x is equal to positive, oh, what am I doing? 2 plus or minus root 40 over 6. Root 40 can be simplified. Root 40 can be simplified to be 2 root 10. So x is equal to 2 plus or minus root 10 divided by 6. You can take it 2 out of all the coefficients. Divide by 2. And your final answer would be x is equal to 1 plus or minus root 10 divided by 3. All I did was I divided all the coefficients by 2.
We have to put the 1
The 1 plus, you have to put. Yeah.
Do you do the 2?
You can if you want, or you can leave it as that. If that 10 doesn't simplify, see how root 10 is just the root 10? We would never put that into decimal form. And you're okay leaving it like that. If that root 10 can be simplified nicely, write it out as 2 things. So if like that was root 4, you know how that works out nicely to just be 2? Then you get 2 whole answers. This one is 2 kind of really ugly answers. So we just leave it like that.
So if it did work out.
LA and then Maddie. Okay, go ahead, Maddie.
If it did work out to be like 2 separate ones, would you do 3 of these? So it'd be like 1 plus 2 divided by 3 plus minus.
Yeah, and then you'd solve them out perfectly.
Okay.
So 1 plus 2 would be 3. 3 divided by 3 would be 1. If you can get it to answer, that's called simplest form, right? If you can do that radical, that's simplifying that radical. At this point, we can't simplify any further. We're kind of stuck. Okay, B. B is a lot more of a headache to simplify. We have an x squared, we have an x, and we have nothing. That's fantastic. But we have to have it all on one side and equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 5 over 6 from both sides. 5 over 6x. So my equation will be 2 over 3 x squared plus, minus, what the heck is that? Minus 5 over 6 x plus 1 equals 0. What's really going to help you is if you don't have fractions. So how can we get rid of those fractions? If we multiplied everything by 6 right now, would that help us? Yeah, that's exactly what we want to do. Multiply everything by 6.
The biggest number, or?
Because 3 goes into 6.
Oh.
So if we multiply this first one by 6, it'll work out nicely. If we multiply the second one 6, it works out nicely. And the third one by 6 works out nicely. 6 is the lowest common multiple, the least common multiple. So we multiply everything by 6. And we get 4x squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Multiplying 6 by the 0, like on the other side.
Like the bracket thing that we did before.
Nope, you're okay. Yeah. Now we can solve that inside, right? No, we won't have to. We'll be okay.
No, but would you put it like outside?
Like you mean you want to do,
Yeah. Yeah. So,
but we want 1 over 6, right? Does it cancel out? Yeah. You can do that if you want. It's not going to change our answer. If you're comfortable with doing that, that's fine. The only reason we get away without doing it on this one is we actually multiplied both sides by 6. It's just our other side is 0. 6 times 0 is 0. In other cases, we were multiplying by this 1 over 6 because we didn't want to change the other side of the equation. The other side of the equation was something, and we wanted to leave it as that something. Okay, use your quad formula. Give it a shot on your own. Quad formula that, see if you can get what it is. You can ask questions while we go over it. Time. Gentlemen, yeah, I want to know your question.
So when I tried to figure that before I crashed, I took the 5 over 6. Or called it the 5 times the thing was 6.
Like the very first thing over here. Yes. Times everything by 6.
But when I have the 2/3, it says
2, that's a good question. That's what you're saying. 2/3. 2/3 times 6 is equal to 4. So 6 times 2 is 12, divided by 3 is 4. That's where that 4 came from over here.
Oh, that's
Okay. Any other questions? Or can I go on? Yes. Okay. So we all got to this step together, and then we moved on to do the quadratic formula. Minus b, negative times -5 is just 5. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is just 5 squared, is 25. Minus 4 times a times c. All divided by 2 times a. That's where that 8 came from. That's our formula. Please memorize that. Whatever trick you need to do, make it happen. I simplified underneath the radical sign. I got 25 minus 96 is -71. That's where that came from. 25 minus 96. I stopped here. Why did I stop here, Ryan? Because you can't root a negative. So if I can't root a negative, what does that tell me? No real roots. And what does that tell me? No x-intercepts. There is a y-intercept. Yeah. No x-intercepts. London. No, just put no real roots. But I just want you guys to understand what that means if there's no real roots. Right, because you can't square root -71. Okay, word problems. Yeah, if you guys fast forward to practice question 2, so the very last slide of this one. It says surface area of a cylinder. So somewhere on your page, you're going to want to write that out. the surface area of a cylinder is equal to, no, it's like pi r h, actually it's 2 pi r h plus pi r squared. Google it. Best way to figure these things out is to Google it. No, just missing my tooth. Hey, write that down so you can do this question at home later. It's not home time. I'm doing the one before. This one. How long do you need that up there? This is the second word problem. We're going back one. We're actually going to do this one together. Are you kidding me? Let's go. This is the second word. Look, just match up the slide. Because I want to move on.
What we're doing.
We're doing the first one, but they're not done writing down the question, the formula. Write the formula down. Do that question at home. Okay, go back to the other one. We're going to do this one right now. Maybe not if we stay confused for the next 10 minutes. S means slant height. So the surface area of a cone with radius r and slant height s is given by that formula. A cone has a surface area of 300 and a slant height of 15. What is the radius of the cone to the nearest hundredth of a centimeter? They've given you 300 is equal to pi r, and the s is 15 plus pi r squared. If there's two variables.
Yeah, because like in physics we can't do it if there's two.
So there's only one.
Yeah.
So if you look at this, they gave us an s value. And they gave us an s value of 15. So we're down to one variable of just r. So all I did was I took our formula and I filled in the information they gave us. Area equal to 300.
Yeah, but like
S is equal to 15.
I isolated our.
Great question. In this class, if you have something that's squared, we can solve for it. In physics, I don't think you move on. You're kind of screwed, right?
Yeah.
In our class, we factor it. Same idea. So if you move 300 to the other side, so you have 0 is equal to, and reorder it to the way we're used to seeing it, pi r squared plus 15 pi r plus, minus and r is your x. Just give me 2 seconds. 2 seconds. R is your x. Pi is your a value. 15 pi is your b value. And negative 300
Would
is
all
your
the
c
students
value.
come to the office, please? So we just Silva.